If someone had told me a year ago that my father's second wedding would mark the beginning of my most profound betrayal, I would have laughed. At the time, I was in love. Stupidly, recklessly, passionately. Jake had a way of looking at me that made the world feel small and safe. And for a while, that was enough. My name is Lena. I'm 24, a recent graduate with a decent marketing job and a tendency to trust too easily. Jake and I had been together for 2 years. We met at a bookstore, bonding over a worn copy of Wuthering Heights. His charm was quiet but magnetic, and he had this boyish confidence that made you want to believe everything he said. My father, Mark, had just turned 58 and was preparing to marry Clarissa, a woman only 14 years older than me. Their engagement was a whirlwind, 6 months of romantic getaways, luxury dinners, and public declarations. My sister Emma, who's 2 years younger and endlessly curious, called it rich people drama. I just nodded. I wasn't close to Clarissa, but I tried to keep things civil. After all, it made my father happy. At first, Clarissa seemed polished, pleasant, if not a bit performative. Always in designer heels, her makeup flawlessly done, her laughter just a tad too loud. She had a way of talking to me, like I was a child she didn't want to deal with. Subtle, but biting. Still, I didn't think much of it. I assumed the worst she could do was be a high-maintenance stepmother. I was wrong. Jake came to the estate with me the week before the wedding. My father had invited close family and friends to spend time at his countryside property. It was the kind of place that felt detached from reality. Rolling hills, a vineyard, and a massive house that echoed with the kind of wealth I never got used to. That first evening, we all gathered for dinner under fairy lights and soft jazz. Clarissa wore a slinky red dress that clung to her like silk on fire. Jake couldn't stop looking at her. I noticed it. Just a flicker of a glance too long. A breath held. A smirk exchanged. I brushed it off. Who wouldn't stare? She looked stunning. I chalked it up to instinct and tried to focus on Emma's ramblings about her latest podcast obsession. The second night, Jake said he was going for a walk after dinner. I offered to join him, but he declined. Just need to clear my head, he said, brushing his fingers against my arm. I watched him disappear down the gravel path and turn back to the fire pit where everyone else was sipping wine and roasting marshmallows like life was perfect. Half an hour passed. Then an hour. I excused myself, something gnawing in my gut. I wasn't suspicious yet. Just uneasy. The estate was large, and the guest rooms were in a separate wing. I decided to take the long hallway toward Clarissa's room. Maybe I just needed to see her asleep in bed, curled under her expensive duvet, so I could laugh at myself for worrying. But the light under her door was on. I froze. Soft laughter. A man's voice, muffled, but unmistakable. My pulse thudded in my ears. I leaned in, heart pounding, and heard her say, "You shouldn't be here. But you couldn't stay away, could you?" Jake's voice replied, low and intimate. "Neither could you." The rest blurred, gasping, moaning, the rustle of sheets. I felt cold, like something vital had snapped inside me. I fumbled for my phone and, with shaking hands, captured a short video. I didn't watch it. I didn't need to. I just needed proof that I wasn't going insane. I stood there longer than I should have, invisible in my own home, a ghost tethered to a truth too heavy to carry. When I returned to my room, Jake was already there, shirtless, pretending to read. "You okay?" he asked, looking up. I smiled, a brittle, plastic thing.
"Fine.
Just tired." I climbed into bed beside him, skin crawling, every nerve on high alert. He kissed my shoulder. I wanted to scream. The next morning, Clarissa greeted me with a radiant smile and a mimosa. "Sleep well?" she chirped. I nodded, dead behind the eyes. Like a baby. She wore a silk robe that barely stayed tied. Jake passed behind her, and she didn't flinch. Didn't avoid eye contact. If anything, she smiled a little too long at me, like she wanted me to know. Like this was a game she was already winning. I didn't tell my father.
Not then.
He was happy, glowing in a way I hadn't seen since my mother left. He adored Clarissa. He trusted her. To drop that truth on him days before his wedding felt cruel, even if it was right. So I swallowed my rage and smiled through my teeth. But something inside me had already shifted. Emma noticed. "You've been quiet," she said that night while we were folding place cards for the reception. "Just tired." I lied again. She watched me carefully, then smirked. "Is it Clarissa? She gives me weird vibes." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. The rest of the week blurred. Laughter, wine, fittings, rehearsals. I moved like a mannequin, present but hollow. Jake acted normal. Too normal. He was attentive, affectionate, even helpful with wedding prep. Clarissa was radiant, rehearsing vows in a voice that could sell ice to a glacier. But I was planning something. I didn't know exactly what. Not yet. But I knew this much. I wasn't going to let them walk away unscathed. I started collecting evidence. Quietly.
Strategically.
Watching, listening. Waiting for the right moment. Because this wasn't just about betrayal. This was about burning everything they built from the inside out. The morning after I caught them together, I stood before the mirror and barely recognized myself. My eyes were ringed with darkness, my lips pressed into a line that had forgotten how to smile. Something inside me had hardened overnight, a steel resolve born from heartbreak. I had been shattered, yes, but I wasn't broken. I spent the day pretending. That was the first rule of revenge. Never reveal your hand too early. Jake kissed me on the forehead when I brought him coffee, his lips brushing my skin like nothing had changed. "You're amazing," he said. I nodded. "I know." He smiled, oblivious, and walked away. Clarissa floated through the house in a lavender robe, calling florists and adjusting menus like she wasn't sleeping with her stepdaughter's boyfriend. Her voice was syrupy sweet, but every word dripped with control. She played her part well, better than I ever gave her credit for. "Have you seen your father this morning?" she asked as I passed her in the hallway. "He went into town with Aunt Rita," I replied, keeping my tone flat. Clarissa hummed.
Good.
"He's so stressed. I'm doing everything I can to make this perfect."
Perfect.
That word tasted like poison. That evening, I installed a small camera in Clarissa's guest suite, tucked behind a picture frame on the far wall. I had access to the security panel and knew the system inside and out. I didn't care if it was legal. I cared about the truth. And I wanted more than just a grainy recording of whispered betrayal. I wanted irrefutable, undeniable, devastating evidence. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. There they were, Jake entering her room again late at night. Their embrace. The kiss. The words. Every lie they told with their bodies preserved in digital clarity. I saved the file to a drive and locked it away in my suitcase. Jake still didn't know I knew. That was the cruelest part. He kept acting like my boyfriend, holding my hand, telling me I looked beautiful. Each word added fuel to the fire that now smoldered quietly behind my smile. I couldn't do this alone.
I needed an ally. Emma.
She found me on the balcony that night, staring out at the vineyard bathed in moonlight. "You've been off," she said gently. "Not just tired. Something else." I stayed silent. "You can tell me, you know. I'm not stupid." I turned to her, my throat tight. What if someone betrayed you in the worst way, and telling the truth would destroy everything? Emma didn't hesitate. Then they deserve to be destroyed. I smiled, small and sad. "I thought you'd say that. Is it Clarissa?" I didn't answer, but I didn't need to. She saw it in my eyes. Emma swore then, violently, creatively, and hugged me so tightly it knocked the air out of my lungs. "You're not alone," she whispered. "Whatever you're planning, I'm in." I didn't cry. I couldn't, but I felt the ice in my chest crack slightly. The following day, I cornered Jake in the wine cellar. It was quiet, secluded, and the perfect place for secrets to be revealed. He looked surprised. "You okay?" "I know," I said. His face drained of color. "Know what?" I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen. A still from the video filled the display, his hand on Clarissa's waist, her lips inches from his. His jaw dropped. "Lena, wait. I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you were drunk?" That it was a mistake? That it meant nothing? It did mean nothing, he insisted. It was a moment of weakness. She came onto me and I screwed up, okay? But I love you. You're disgusting, I said coldly. And you're a coward. He stepped forward. Lena, please, just let me fix this. You already did, I said, slipping the phone back into my pocket. I recorded this conversation too, by the way. Just for context. His eyes widened. What are you going to do? I leaned in close. I'm going to let the truth speak for itself. Jake tried to say something else, but I was already walking away. I didn't need to hear him beg. I didn't need another lie. That night, I couldn't sleep. My room felt too small, the air too still. I walked the halls like a ghost, passing sleeping guests, half-drunk bottles, scattered decorations for the wedding that should never happen. My father had never looked happier. That was the hardest part. He loved Clarissa with a boyish sincerity that made my heart ache. Watching him laugh, watching him plan, watching him place all his hope in a woman who saw him as nothing more than a step toward a better lifestyle, it made me sick. Aunt Rita, however, had always been skeptical. She's too polished, she'd said once.
Too poised.
Real love leaves room for mess. I found her in the kitchen early that morning, sipping coffee and flipping through a wedding schedule. You're up early, she said, not looking up. I needed air. You've got that look, she said, finally meeting my eyes. What look? The one your mother had before she blew up your dad's car. Figuratively. Mostly. I chuckled despite myself. You don't trust Clarissa, I said. Never did. I hesitated. You might want to be near Dad after the ceremony. Just be close. She narrowed her eyes. Something I should know?
Not yet, I said.
But you will. By the time the rehearsal dinner arrived, I had everything I needed. The footage, the confession, the speech I'd rewritten 10 times in my head. Clarissa clinked her glass, glowing in designer silk, and announced, "Tomorrow, I become part of a beautiful family." I raised my own glass and smiled. She had no idea. I watched Jake from across the table. His smile was tight. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted his fork. He knew what was coming. He just didn't know when. And that was exactly how I wanted it. The day of the wedding approached like a storm front, still, heavy, electric with expectation. I wore a pale blue dress, subtle makeup, and a single silver pendant that used to belong to my mother. A silent tribute to the woman who had once survived her own kind of betrayal. I tucked the flash drive into a velvet pouch and slid it into my clutch. By nightfall, they would all know. The liars, the manipulators, the betrayers. None of them would leave that ceremony unscathed. Not this time. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the sky almost offensively blue. Birds chirped. Staff bustled around the estate grounds, stringing up white drapes and arranging centerpieces made of ivory roses and eucalyptus. Everything was perfect, on the surface. But beneath the curated beauty, a storm waited to break. I stood in front of the long mirror in my room, smoothing down the silk of my dress. My reflection looked composed, elegant even, but I could feel the fire roaring beneath my ribs. Today wasn't about celebration. It was about exposure. And every detail had to be precise. I glanced at the clutch on my vanity inside the flash drive. Inside that everything. The footage of Jake and Clarissa in her room. Their voices. Their laughter. Their betrayal. I paired it with the audio from Jake's cellar confession and edited it into a short, brutal montage. 3 minutes. 3 minutes was all it would take to unravel the fantasy Clarissa had spent the last year crafting. Emma met me in the hallway just before we went downstairs. She wore a soft peach dress and a tense expression. "You're sure about this?" she asked. I nodded. "It's the only way." She gave me a long look, then exhaled. "Okay, just don't hold back." I wasn't planning to. Guests began to arrive around midday, friends of my father's former colleagues, distant relatives I barely recognized. They milled around the vineyard garden, sipping champagne and complimenting the view. Jake played the part of the doting boyfriend well, flashing his rehearsed smile and placing his hand lightly on my lower back. It made my skin crawl. Clarissa, in her custom lace gown, looked every bit the polished bride. Her hair fell in soft curls around her shoulders, and she moved through the crowd with a regal grace that made people stare. She kissed my father on the cheek and whispered something in his ear that made him laugh like a teenager. They looked like a fairy tale. But fairy tales are lies in pretty dresses. I waited until the guests were seated, until the string quartet had played their final soft note, until the officiant cleared his throat and called for silence. My father stood at the altar, beaming. Clarissa approached down the aisle, veil billowing behind her, every step calculated. Then I stepped forward. "Wait," I said, loud enough to cut through the murmurs. The officiant paused. Clarissa blinked, startled. My father turned. "Lena?" I felt the world contract around me, everything quiet except the thrum of my heartbeat. I walked slowly to the front, clutch in hand, and faced the guests. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I began, my voice steady. "But before these vows are spoken, there's something everyone needs to see." Clarissa's smile faltered. Jake, from the second row, stood up. "Lena, don't." I ignored him. I reached into my clutch and handed the flash drive to the technician managing the wedding screen behind the altar. "It's a short video," I said. "Please, just watch." The technician hesitated, glancing between me and my father. My father looked confused, hurt even, but he nodded. "Go ahead." The screen flickered to life. The first frame, Jake entering Clarissa's room, glancing over his shoulder before closing the door behind him. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Then, the kiss. The way her hands slid over his shoulders. The words exchanged. "You couldn't stay away, neither could you."
Gasps.
The footage shifted to the wine cellar. Jake's voice trembling. "She came on to me, but I love you." Silence followed.
Thick.
Breathless. The video ended. Clarissa's face was frozen in horror. Jake looked like he might faint. And my father stood motionless, staring at the screen as if it had betrayed him personally. "Dad," I said softly, turning to him. "I didn't want to believe it. But I couldn't let you marry someone who lies like this, who hurts people like this." Clarissa stepped forward, voice shrill. "This is ridiculous. That video, it's taken out of context. There's no context that makes that okay." Emma snapped from the aisle. Jake moved toward me. "Lena, please."
We can talk about this.
Privately. I stepped back. We have nothing left to talk about. The crowd was no longer silent. Guests murmured, some standing, others looking away in discomfort. My father slowly turned to Clarissa. "Is it true?" he asked. She didn't answer. "Clarissa," he said again, his voice cracking, "did you sleep with him?" She looked at Jake, then at me. Then she scoffed. "This was a mistake," she muttered. "All of it." "Then leave," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "You always hated me." "No," I said. "I tried to like you, but you made that impossible." Jake reached for my arm. "I never wanted to hurt you, but you did," I said, voice low. "And you'll regret it long after I stop caring." Security escorted Clarissa away. She didn't fight it. Jake lingered for a moment, staring at me like he didn't know who I was anymore.
Good.
Because the Lena who trusted blindly was gone. I turned to my father. He looked pale, shaken. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He shook his head slowly.
No, I'm sorry.
"I should have seen it." He hugged me then, tight and silent. The kind of hug that spoke of things too big for words. The ceremony was called off. Guests dispersed quietly, murmuring about the scandal, the footage, the drama. Some offered sympathy. Others just looked stunned. Emma and I returned to the house and locked the door behind us. She poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me one.
"To the truth," she said.
"To burning lies down to the roots," I replied. We clinked glasses. The estate was quiet again. Peaceful, even, but I wasn't the same girl who'd arrived here a week ago in love and naive. I was sharper now, wiser.
And free.
The fallout would come, rumors, tension, maybe even more lies, but I didn't care. Because I had done what needed to be done. And I would do it again.